Okay, I think that's good.
All
here
right.
we go. If I can just get you to state your name.
Sure.
And your title.
Sure. My name's Ryan Miller. I am the co-designer and brand manager of Disney Lorcana.
Your inspiration to make the game. How it all came together. Where did it start?
It actually started before I came on to the team when Ravesnburger was down in Los Angeles meeting with Disney. They do these kind of summits where they just talk about all sorts of stuff. We have so many different Disney products. We have Villainous, of course, and lots of other stuff. So they meet regularly. And it was, I think, after one of these days of meetings that the Ravesburger team went to this bar called the Famous Bar, and they started talking about, like, what space are we not in that we want to be in, right? And that's when, like, somebody, I don't know who, but somebody said, what about a trading card game? What about a Disney trading card game? And I think what I've been told is it was pretty electric. The air was pretty electric there. And then they started talking about, and I think Shane Hartley was there. He's a creative director. Talking about this idea of what if we had some of the characters kind of look different than, we've ever seen them before and stuff like that. And it got everyone really excited, and that's really where it started. Of course, they were already down there, so they began these talks with Disney, and that's really where it started. And so it became known as Project Famous internally. That's why we called it, because it was conceived at this bar called the Famous Bar. I had been working as a freelance card game designer at this point for 5 or 6 years by the time I started working with Ravesburger on a board game based on The Princess Bride. And I was working with Steve Warner. He was already in-house with Ravesburger. He and I have known each other for 20 plus years. He's a dear man. He was in my wedding, right? And he was my producer on this Princess Bride game. And so that means he just would work with me. We do a lot of play tests, and we do external play tests and all that stuff. And it's basically just, it's his job to get the game and ready to ship, right? But it also gave me a inside look to Ravesburger. I'd known of them, of course, but when I really started looking at their library and saw the care that they put into the game experience, they put into every aspect. I mean, just the attention to detail and the love, right, that they put into everything, and it was really impressive to me. And then, he told me towards the end of that project about Project Famous. And of course, I've been a Disney fan since I was 5. Been in trading card games for 25 years, and so this is like, it's one of those. Yeah, this sounds great, right? I was cautiously optimistic, I got to say, because trading card games are really complex beasts, right? And it takes a lot of work. They're every aspect, right? Marketing, production, art, design, everything is more complicated. So then I got my copy of Princess Bride, like the one that they send us. I think they call them FEP, and it's just like they send us from the factory just to make sure that this is what we're going to make. Is this what you want us to make, kind of thing? And I was just stunned. It's a beautiful game. There's just so many little details in the art of the box. You go inside the components and everything, and it really showed me, that, like I said, that attention to detail and that love, right? And I'm a big believer in that. I think that if the people who made a thing love it, the people who pick up the box feel it, right? It almost transmits all the way down to their fingertips, right? And so that was the moment when I was like, okay, not only can Ravesburger do this, but they're probably the only people who could do it right. And that has been from the very beginning. Like, I was so impressed with the commitment. Ravesburger's like, we want to get this right. So they expanded the team. We put together a team of industry TCG veterans. And the first work that they started doing before I came along was really about the story, right? It was important to us that the story was rich. It was a world you wanted to explore, but it also made sense as to why there's these different characters out, and why some of them look, from different franchises, right? And why some of them look different than you've seen them before. Because we want to send a message, right? That we're not just putting characters on cards, right? We wanted to have this kind of rich world that you would be excited to explore. We know it's important to us. We know it's important to Disney fans. And so we want to make sure that we honored that, right? And then when I came along, finally after all that, I get hired and I start working with Steve. And Steve and I, on the game design side, we kind of set some goals, some ideas. We thought a lot about who's going to be playing this, of course. And we, maybe 2 general big buckets, right? We've got trading card gamers and we've got Disney fans, and there's certainly some overlap, right? A decent amount. But we also want the folks that aren't in that overlap, especially on the Disney side. We really hope that a lot of new people will come in and try this game that maybe have never played a trading card game before. And really, I think a large number are going to be like, oh my gosh, because they're super fun. Trading card games, building your own deck and having your favorite characters in there and your strategy and all that stuff, it's super fun, right? So we thought about a lot of the goals, and I think one word that kept coming up was just welcoming. Like, we wanted to be welcoming, right? And I think that means a lot of things, but for us in the design space, it just meant we wanted a game that was relatively easy to pick up and to learn, right? So that people who've never played this type of game before would feel welcomed, And so that was a big one for us. And the other thing I think we thought about was something we called the confrontation level, and it's not the competitive level; it's different. The confrontation level is something that we felt that a lot of gamers, they don't, maybe not, a lot of the folks that we're wanting to bring into this game may not enjoy that high confrontation. And so we thought about it almost like a spectrum. Like you've got like solitaire on this side, you've got chess on this side, and a lot of trading card games really kind of occupy that space. And I think for good reason, right? You need interactivity, and interactivity it can be confrontational, right? Mm-hmm. And we have interactivity in the game. It is not, but we felt like we pulled that confrontation level back a bit, right? You don't actually win the game by confronting your opponent, right? You have to quest, right, to gain those points. You slow your opponent down by confronting, but by challenging their characters. But you don't win the game that way. But also from a thematic standpoint, a lot of games tend to be about like eliminating your opponent, for example. Like I'm dueling you, I guess, right? And I'm trying to kill you, essentially. And even that, was something we wanted to, we didn't want to go towards, right? And so the idea that you're racing to 20, I think, was a kind of a natural extension of that idea of just like, no, we're just on a quest, mm-hmm. and only one of us can complete the quest, and then whoever does it first wins, mm-hmm. So, and I think those were the big kind of, and then we just started this long process of, basically it's like throwing pasta on the wall to see if it's done, right? You're just like, nope, you throw it, you try it, you try this, you try that. We started with some wild concepts, and because we were just like, but at the end of the day, we didn't set out to be innovative in the game design space, because we wanted, innovation risks kind of alienating one of those two groups, right? And we didn't want to do that. What we really wanted was a game that supported and elevated the theme and the characters, right? We talked about like, if I just want to put my princesses together, I should be able to do that. Like that should be something I can just do, stack them all together, shuffle them up, and play, right? And so once we, really kind of started keying into that, and we discarded about a dozen game designs, I think the moment that it started to kind of crystallize for us was the ink system, like that system of taking a card from your hand and making it into ink. That concept isn't new, right? Like using cards from your hand as resources, that's not new. But I do think the idea of like there's certain ones that can't be inked is something we added. I think that's really interesting because from a deck building standpoint, of course, you don't want to put too many in your deck because you'll get stymied with your ink. But from a design standpoint, it allows us to, it's a really neat knob to turn on balancing the card, because we can take the ink off a card that we think might be just a little too powerful, and it allows us to kind of say, hey, don't put too many of these in your deck, and it's something that, I don't know, it's just really from a designer point of view, like if there are certain strategies, like control, for example, and control, is all about kind of, basically kind of messing with your opponent's stuff, right? and it's not very fun to play against, but it is kind of necessary in a game to have those elements, right? But by taking the ink off a lot of those cards, we can kind of make sure that there's no really competitive control deck, right? I'm sure control will be a component of a competitive deck, but to make sure that it's still fun to play, because control is just not fun to play against. So we don't want it to be the top tier deck, right? We don't want that. But it gives us that really interesting knob. I really like that. So it really started crystallizing then, and then after that, it really started to fall into place.
So from that first meeting to today, how long are we talking?
Over 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that really impressed me about Ravesnburger is the commitment to getting it right. I heard this phrase, I don't know who said it, but it's like, we're not here to be right, we're here to get it right. And that means, we're going to make mistakes, and we're not going to be 100% perfect, but no one is going to do that, right? But we wanted to get it as right as we could. And that's no small investment in people and resources. I mean, it was a huge, but it was really important from the very top of Ravesburger all the way down that we did. So like that 6-month period where we designed the game, that wasn't because we were handed 6 months and say, design a game. They told Steve and I, like, our boss and even the head of games and CEO, it was one message. It was like, take the time you need. We'll make it work, but make the gameplay what it needs to be, right? And that alone, I mean, it goes to show you, I think, that that commitment. So that was really neat. I was like, and it was a little bit of pressure too, because it's like, we gotta, it's kind of one of the cornerstones of the experience, right? Is the gameplay. So it was a little bit, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out.
Awesome. I've had the opportunity to work with Disney in a very limited capacity
Oh, cool.
on content creation.
Oh, cool.
And so I know how particular they can be about what I'm doing, how I'm doing
Sure,
it, where
sure.
I'm doing it. What was it like working
You know,
with Disney?
You say particular, I say passionate, right? And that's one of the things I really appreciate about them, because I am too, right? And I want to get it right. And when I tell you about attention to detail and love, that's them too. I mean, the team we've worked with at Disney has been amazing collaborators, and they really have helped guide us, but also, they've anything they push back on us, we know it's for the same purpose, right? It's like, we want this great experience. They want this great experience. So no, they've been amazing. I mean, I've really enjoyed working with Disney. It's been very cool.
There are a ton of cards.
There are what?
There are a ton of cards
Oh, okay.
in this first release.
204.
Which ones are your favorite? Which ones were either most fun to work on, but then your favorite?
Okay, so most fun to work on. Well, one of mine that I'm really proud of is Tamatoa Drab Little Crab, because in his song, he talks about how he wasn't always this glam. He was a drab little crab once. And I was watching Moana for this very purpose, and I said, oh my God. I wrote that down. I said, we got to do Drab Little Crab. And so there he is. He looks like a teenager with like barnacle zits on his face, and he's holding up one piece of gold, and he's like, ooh.
His first little shiny?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And I was really tickled that we were able to do that, right? So that was pretty cool. My favorite cards tend to be just because of story, right? My favorite in that regard is probably Grandma Tala. She had, now I don't know if you've seen it, but spoiler alert, she passes away during the movie.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
Trust me.
I know, I'm kidding. You thought I was serious. I'm kidding. But in the game, so when she's banished from play, instead of going to the discard pile like you'd normally do, she turns into ink, right? Because she'll always be with you, right?
Yeah.
She always, and I just love those kind of moments where the gameplay reinforces the story, like Ariel on Human Legs, right? She's a card that can't sing songs. It says on our card, cannot sing songs. But singing songs is another one I really enjoy. That mechanic of singing songs is a good example, too, of like theme and gameplay coming together. When you exert one of your characters to sing a song, it's such a delightful moment. And then you have to sing the song when you play the card. I mean, you almost have to do it, right? And so you get a room full of Lorcana players and just randomly hear,
Do all the decks have songs in them?
They all have songs, but there's not a ton of them in there. But the way it works is it's basically an alternate way to play the card. Mm-hmm. So songs are just a subset of action cards. Mm-hmm. So you can play them just like an action card. You pay their ink cost, do the card, discard the card. Songs let you, instead of paying the ink, exert one of your characters whose cost is at least as high as the songs to sing it for you. And that means you don't spend the ink at all, right? Mm-hmm. So the choice is, but you're exerting a character, which means they can't quest or challenge, and they're vulnerable to being challenged. So it's kind of a trade-off, but sometimes, like a good example is Friends on the Other Side, which is a card that gets you 2 cards, right? Draw 2 cards. Well, having somebody sing that is really nice, because the 2 cards you get, you only have your ink is freed up to play those cards. But if I had paid the 3 ink to do it, then now I'm down some ink that turn. And if I'm in a bind and I really need those cards and I need to be able to play them, I want maximum options, I'm going to do that. So it creates a really nice, I mean, it's one of those things where, the thematic and the mechanic line up and the strategy kind of comes out of that, right? And I think it's just pretty cool.
How much did you watch of things while doing this?
Well, I've seen a lot of the movies. I've seen a lot of movies already, but it was really at the beginning of design for the first chapter. Steve and I basically split the cards, like 102 for you, 102 for me. But then we also had Kelly Diggs at the time, who was our narrative lead. He's since moved on, but we have Sam McFerrin now doing that role and kicking butt at it. But we all 3 of us kind of came together and we talked about franchises we don't include and that sort of thing. And of course, we pretty quickly had to narrow our options down because there's just so much. And so we decided, but we also wanted to go a bit wide with this set because we wanted to set that precedent of like, there's lots of different ways we can go, right? And so we decided, okay, let's do the animated features. We'll stick to those, and not even all of those, right? Mm-hmm. And then some of the shorts so that we could get Mickey and Friends in there too, right? And then from there, it was a matter of, okay, let's refresh, because I've seen these movies, but let's refresh our minds on these things. So it was a lot of just watching them at home, Disney Plus, that sort of thing. And like I did with Drab Little Crab, just taking notes while you're watching, that sort of thing. But it was so fun. But when it came to actually assigning the characters and all that stuff, then that was a process of like, okay, we want to make sure we have something, that, some of the heavy hitter characters, some of the more popular ones, the Stitches, the Moanas, the Elsas, that sort of thing. But then I see about 204 cards, as you can also go pretty deep, like our Treasure Planet card that we have in the set. or Sword in the Stone, which is my favorite movie that is also underrated. And so I absolutely abused my power and got some Sword in the Stone cards in there. So.
Awesome. No, it's good.
I mean, if you can't, come on, work on a Disney game, you can't do a little bit of that.
I have younger kids. Something like Pokemon or Magic, you just can't think through everything that's happening.
I see. Yeah.
This one, 100%, you can play this. How
great.
important was that?
Absolutely important. I mean, our target audience actually was 20 to 35-year-old TCG fans and Disney fans, but we knew that a much wider range of people. And when I say our target, that's really, it just means like the imagery and the voice and things like that. We didn't want it to feel like a kid's game because we risk, of course, losing the older players. So we kind of face it that way, but that doesn't mean we're excluding those younger. In fact, we fully expect. I mean, it says on the box 8+, and I think we hit that mark. I think that obviously every kid's different, right? But I think we hit that mark, and I think that especially the characters go so far to adding that welcoming feeling. Just even if you don't know how to play the game, just opening a pack and thumbing through it, there's that delight of like, oh my god, I got a Pongo, right? Like, oh wow, I got a Moana.
That will be my
yeah, right. And that's so fun. And then organizing your collection and collecting your maybe if your son's favorite movie is Moana, collecting all the Moana and Maui cards and things like that. It's just really fun. But hopefully they'll also be able to kind of pick up the game and start getting that. And I think the gameplay is totally easy to pick up, generally speaking. But the strategy is where they're really going to start. But that's the best way. That's what I love about games for kids, right? Is because they're figuring it out. They're forging these new neural pathways, right? And it's so amazing to see. I love, like my son is 9 months old, and I love seeing him figure stuff out, right? We got this like little box with a little ramp that comes out and a hole, and you drop a wooden ball in, and it comes rolling out. And I was like, I wonder how long it'll take him to figure out how to put that, but when he finally did it, I was like, yes, my boy, right? But I love that, because he created a new pathway, right? And with games, they do that a lot, right? There's a lot of different things that you learn over time. Like, oh, maybe, like one of the big decisions in this game is when to quest and when to challenge, right? And for new players, questing is just the default, and that's awesome. You just kind of quest, and it's super fun. You see your point total go up. But then at some point, they're going to be like, oh, now I've got to look at the table. But the rules didn't tell them to do that. They're figuring it out. They're like, oh, wait, I've got to...
I think I watched you play with someone who did that.
Oh, nice.
Quest, and then it was like, oh, no.
Yeah. And it's like there's that point in the game where the race becomes less important than mitigating your opponent's successes, right? And so, and knowing when to do that is definitely skill testing, right? But it's really fun to see people kind of start going, oh. And those moments are great, too, because oftentimes what will happen is that the game will be over, because it's only, 10, 20-minute game, depending on the decks involved. And you're like, oh, let's do it again, because I think I figured something out, right? Like, oh, yeah, and those moments are gold, right? Especially for kids. So I'm a big fan of tabletop for kids. There's so much to learn there, so many good things.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks for your time today. It was a pleasure meeting you.